Our chronicle of world history continues, starting in 600 BC. 600 BC, regeneration of Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar, the second ruler of the Neo-Babylonian Empire, was an inspirational military leader and became known for his building projects throughout Mesopotamia. He ordered the regeneration of the city of Babylon to restore its fading reputation, including the rebuilding of the ziggurat, and legend has it, the creation of the famous Hanging Gardens. And we have a sub-timeline here. 600 to 322 BC, Greek philosophy. The foundation of Western philosophy were laid by Greek thinkers beginning in the 6th century BC and reaching a high point in classical Athens. 600 BC, Thales of Miletus is one of the first thinkers to speculate about what everything in the universe is made of. 530 BC, Pythagoras founded a school of mathematics and philosophy in a commune in Italy. 399 BC, Socrates, first of the great Athenian philosophers, is accused of corrupting youths and disrespecting the gods. He drinks hemlock rather than renounce his views. 387 BC, Plato, a protege of Socrates, founded the Academy in Athens, where he presents his ideas to students from all Greece. And Aristotle, in 335 BC, an alumnus of the Academy, founds his own school, the Lyceum, offering alternative philosophical theories. 590 BC, the Nubian rulers of the kingdom of Kush moved their residence from Napata to Meroe. 587 BC, Nebuchadnezzar II destroys the temple in Jerusalem following a Jewish revolt. 550 BC, Cyrus the Great founds the Achaemenid Empire. Cyrus was the king of Anshan, a subject nation of the Median Empire. He led a revolt, defeating the Medians and then conquering the Lydian Empire to form a new Achaemenid Empire, the First Persian Empire. Subsequently, Babylon also fell under Achaemenid rule, leading Cyrus to declare in an inscribed clay cylinder, "I am Cyrus, king of the world." 550 BC, the Temple of Artemis in Ephesus is rebuilt to replace the original that was destroyed by floods. 550 BC, Celtic people began to migrate from their homeland in the northern Alps and settle across Europe. 539 BC, Cyrus conquers Babylon and brings its empire into the Achaemenid Empire. 525 to 402 BC, Egypt comes under Persian control and is ruled by Achaemenid kings. 518 BC, Darius the Great builds Persepolis, his new capital. Darius I ruled the Achaemenid Empire at its most powerful, and his 36-year reign included reforms that unified the Persian. He oversaw a number of construction projects, improving roads and regenerating cities. The grandest of these projects was the building of a completely new ceremonial capital, Persepolis, with a complex of impressive palaces. 509 BC, the Roman Republic is established following the overthrow of the monarchy. 508 to 507 BC, Athenians overthrow the tyrant Hippias. For more than 100 years, the Greek city-states had been ruled by leaders known as tyrants, both good and bad. In Athens, the age of tyrants came to an end when Hippias was overthrown, and his successor Cleisthenes introduced a form of democracy in which the Athenian assembly met on a hill called the Pnyx. This heralded the beginning of a golden age of classical Greece, with Athens at its center. 500 BC, Zapotecs established Monte Alban. As the Zapotec civilization flourished, a site in the southern Mexican highlands was chosen at its center. The Zapotecs began to build Monte Alban, the first great city of Mesoamerica, on a steep hill in the Oaxaca Valley. 499 to 449 BC, in the Greco-Persian Wars, the Greeks defend against Persian invasion in a series of famous battles. In 496 BC, Greek dramatist Sophocles, author of tragedies featuring Antigone and Oedipus, is born. 490 BC, Athenians defeat Persians at Marathon. A decisive battle in the Greco-Persian Wars took place at Marathon, Attica during the first Persian invasion. Darius I planned to take the whole of Greece, sending his forces by sea to Attica. They were met on the coastal plain at Marathon by Athenian troops, who, though outnumbered, outmaneuvered the Persians and won a crushing victory. 490 BC, King Ajatashatru founded Pataliputra, which is modern Patna, in northeast India as capital of the Magadha Empire. 480 BC, Emperor Xerxes I bridges the Hellespont and the Persian armies advances as far as Athens. 480 BC, teachings of the Buddha. Siddhartha Gautama, known later as the Buddha, spent the latter part of his life preaching in northern India. After his death, his disciples collated his teachings and continued to spread his ideas further afield, establishing Buddhism as a major religion. 479 BC, Confucius dies, and his disciples begin compiling the Analects, which record his sayings. 475 BC, Warring States period begin in China. By the beginning of the 5th century BC, the Zhou Kingdom of China fragmented into several more or less autonomous states. As they vied with one another for power in the region, the spring and autumn period came to an end and was replaced by a time of political turmoil known as the Warring States period. The conflict was to continue for a further 2.5 centuries until the Qin state, with its strict authoritarian regime and disciplined military, emerged victorious. 449 BC, a law code, the 12 Tables of the Laws, is published in Rome by the governing decemviri. 447 BC, building of the Parthenon begins. After Greek forces had defeated the Persians, Athens began to thrive again. Pericles oversaw the construction of a number of monuments on the Acropolis, most impressive of which was the Parthenon, a temple dedicated to the goddess Athena, patroness of the city, to replace the temple that was destroyed during the Persian invasion. The building work was finally completed in 432 BC. 440 BC, Herodotus writes the first known history book, the 9-volume Histories. More on Herodotus. Born in Halicarnassus in the Persian Empire, the Greek writer Herodotus is best known as the author of the Histories, an account of the events and leading figures of the Greco-Persian Wars. 431 to 404 BC, the Peloponnesian War is fought between the Delian League, led by Athens, and the Peloponnesian League, led by Sparta. 400 to 350 BC, the Olmec culture enters a period of rapid decline, possibly caused by environmental changes. In 375 BC, Dionysius of Syracuse negotiates a peace treaty with the Carthaginians, ending a series of wars. 356 BC, Shang Yang, a lord of the Chinese state of Qin, initiates reforms that boost the state's influence. 350 BC, Chavan culture reaches its peak. A rapid increase in the population of the Chavan culture of Peru brought about changes in its social structure around the middle of the century. The major city, Chavan de Juntar, in the Andes became less important as a political and religious center as semi-urban settlements and ceremonial centers developed in the lowlands, spreading Chavan cultural influence across the region and along the coast. 338 BC, Philip of Macedonia vanquishes the allied Greek forces to take control of almost all of Greece. 336 to 323 BC, Alexander of Macedonia unites Greece. When Philip II of Macedonia was murdered, his son Alexander, aged 20, assumed the throne. He defeated the Thebans, uniting all the Greek peoples under his rulership. Continuing his father's empire-building project, he led Greek forces in a 10-year campaign to conquer the Achaemenid Empire and bring the whole of Persia under Greek control, and went on to expand his empire as far as the Indus Valley. More on Alexander the Great. Alexander III of Macedonia, ruler of the whole of Greece, was a spectacularly successful military leader who in a series of campaigns spread Greek influence as far as the Indian subcontinent. So we have a sub-timeline here. The Roman Gallic Wars from 400 BC to 51 BC. As the Celts began to migrate from the northern Alps to settle in the Po Valley in Italy, they triggered a long series of conflicts with Rome. 387 BC, Brennus of the Senones leads Celts in the sacking of the city of Rome. According to the legend, geese raise the alarm, shown above. 298 to 290 BC, an alliance of Samnites, Gauls, and others engage with Rome for control of central and southern Italy. 125 to 121 BC, Roman forces defeat the Gauls of the Arvern tribe, claiming their territory as a Roman province. In 58 to 51 BC, Julius Caesar conducts a major military campaign in his determination to conquer the whole of Gaul. And back to the main timeline again, 332 BC, Alexander conquers Egypt, extending his empire southward until it reaches the kingdom of Kush. 330 BC, Euclid of Alexandria, author of the mathematical treatise Elements, is born. 331 to 185 BC, the Maurya Empire. Chandragupta Maurya established the Maurya Empire by replacing the Nanda dynasty in northern India. When Greek forces began to withdraw from the farther reaches of Alexander the Great's empire after his death, Chandragupta seized the opportunity to invade, bringing all the north of the subcontinent under Maurya rule. 305 BC, founding of the Ptolemaic dynasty. A former bodyguard and companion of Alexander the Great, Ptolemy was appointed governor of Egypt after Alexander's death in 323 BC, and in 305 BC assumed the title of Pharaoh. As Ptolemy I, he founded the Ptolemaic dynasty, ruling Egypt as a Hellenistic kingdom. He was also a writer and historian and was instrumental in making his first capital, Alexandria, a center of Greek culture. 285 BC, the lighthouse at Alexandria is built. Construction of a monumental lighthouse on the small island of Pharos off the coast of Egypt was completed during the reign of Ptolemy II Philadelphus. After 12 years of building work, it stood some 330 feet high, the tallest building in the world at that time. The structure, often known as the Pharos of Alexandria, lasted until damaged by earthquakes in the 10th century AD. 280 BC, the Colossus of Rhodes, a statue standing at the entrance to the city's harbor, is completed. 268 to 232 BC, Asoka rules the Maurya Empire. Asoka began his reign intending to continue the expansion of the empire begun by his grandfather Chandragupta Maurya. Once he had conquered the state of Kalinga in 261 BC, he ruled over all but the extreme south of the Indian subcontinent. The bloody Kalinga campaign prompted a change of heart, and he devoted the rest of his reign to spreading the doctrine of Buddhism, declaring his moral and social edicts by having them inscribed on pillars topped with stone animal capitals around the empire. 264 to 241 BC, the First Punic War. The 3rd century BC saw 3 long wars between the Romans and Carthaginians. The two powers fought for supremacy over the western Mediterranean, but the Romans also took the war into Carthaginian territory in North Africa, notably at the massive naval battle of Ecnomus. After the First Punic War, which lasted 23 years, the Romans defeated the Carthaginians and took control of Sicily. 260 BC, Asoka converts to Buddhism and commissions the building of the Great Stupa at Sankey. 221 BC, the Warring States period comes to an end after Xing, king of Qin, unites the kingdoms of China into a single empire. And we're going to get a little bit into the Qin dynasty here, and you'll see that's the terracotta army that's guarding the mausoleum of the first emperor, and that is symbolic of the power that he wielded. More than 8,000 individually sculpted statues of soldiers along with hundreds of horses and chariots were buried with the emperor as the entourage in the afterlife. The Qin established a unified empire in 221 BC, marking the end of the Warring States period in China. Xing, king of the Qin state, conquered the other 6 belligerent states as Emperor Qin Shi Huang founded the Qin dynasty, the first imperial Chinese dynasty. Qin Shi Huang's success can be attributed to the strict disciplinarian regime that he had established in Qin, which he then applied throughout the empire. Among his achievements was the standardization of currency, weights and measures, and writing systems. He also ordered several massive infrastructure projects, including the building of a northern wall, which later formed the foundation of the Great Wall of China, and a major network of roads that helped encourage trade between China's distant regions. One of his most striking pursuits was a vanity project, the construction of a vast mausoleum as big as a city to house his own tomb, defended by an army of terracotta figures. The Qin dynasty was regarded as tyrannical by many in the conquered states, and the regime came down hard on any dissenting voices. However, Qin Shi Huang and his advisors succeeded in unifying the country after centuries of conflict. The dynasty was not to last. In 206 BC, the second and final Qin emperor was overthrown, and the dynasty was brought to an end. 221 BC, Qin Shi Huang takes power. The founder of the Qin dynasty, Qin Shi Huang, reigned as king from 247 to 221 BC, and then proclaimed himself emperor of a unified China after emerging triumphant over the warring states. His wide-ranging reforms laid the foundations for subsequent Chinese dynasties to follow for more than 2,000 years. After his death, his successor, Qin Shi, was soon ousted by the Han dynasty. 221 to 210 BC, imposition of legalism. Emperor Qin Shi Huang set about establishing centralized control, ending the political and cultural diversity of the 100 schools of thought associated with the 7 warring states. With the help of his imperial chancellor Li Si, he imposed a strict authoritarian form of government known as legalism and a brutal purge of the classical scholars of the previous Zhou dynasty. Books were burned and many scholars were buried alive. 218 BC, Carthaginian general Hannibal crosses the Alps with his army and 37 elephants and defeats the Romans at the Battle of Cannae. And here's a quote attributed to Hannibal: "I will either find a way or make one." 213 to 212 BC, siege of Syracuse. At the height of the Second Punic War, the Romans laid siege to the strategically important city of Syracuse in Sicily, then an independent kingdom. In the aftermath, Archimedes, whose ingenious inventions had helped defend Syracuse, was mistakenly killed by a Roman soldier. 206 BC, the fall of the short-lived Qin dynasty marks the beginning of civil war in China as the Chu and Han kingdoms vie for control. 202 BC, the Han dynasty, discontent with the strict legalist rule of China's Qin dynasty, ultimately led to the downfall in 4 years of conflict centered around the so-called Chu-Han contention. The Han dynasty emerged as the victors and united the empire. They would remain in power for centuries. 181 BC, Shunga dynasty established. Pushyamitra Shunga, a general of the Maurya Empire, established control over northern India after the assassination of Brihadratha, the last Mauryan emperor. 171 to 168 BC, the Romans defeat Perseus of Macedonia in the Third Macedonian War. 165 BC, Judas Maccabeus revolts. After Seleucid ruler Antiochus IV outlawed Jewish practices in Judea and Samaria, Judas Maccabeus and his brother led a revolt, taking Jerusalem in 164 BC. Judas purified the temple, restored Jewish worship, and established the Hasmonean dynasty, which ruled until overthrown by Herod the Great in 37 BC. 150 BC, Great Serpent Mound is built. The Adena were a people of the eastern woodlands of North America. Living in villages of circular houses, they hunted deer and elk, gathered edible grasses, and farmed pumpkin and squash. They built hundreds of mounds, probably as funerary monuments, the most spectacular of which was the Great Serpent Mound in Ohio. It was fashioned in the shape of a serpent with sinuous coils. 146 BC, the Romans destroy Corinth and annex Greece to the province of Macedonia. 146 BC, destruction of Carthage. After the Carthaginians attacked neighboring Numidia, a Roman army led by the consul Scipio Aemilianus landed in North Africa, blockaded Carthage, and finally took it after a year-long siege. Scipio destroyed the city and sold its people into slavery, ending the 120-year Punic Wars. 138 BC, China's Han Emperor Wu sends out an envoy, Zhang Qian, whose findings usher in an era of westward expansion. 104 BC, General Gaius Marius reforms the Roman army. Marius allowed the landless poor to join the army, organizing it into cohorts of around 480 men and legions of around 5,500 with their regular weapons, the pilum or javelin, and gladius or short sword. The new legions were a formidable force. And we got a quote here that's attributed to Plutarch from the life of Marius. Men who were fond of toil without a murmur were called Marius's mules. And that gets us to about 100 BC now, and our chronology will continue. See you next time.